Okay, everyone. If I could just have a little bit of quiet as the final attendees come in. We're going to close the door in just a couple of seconds. Great to see so much conversation already. Okay. Okay, folks. We're going to start. I'm going to ask for some quiet because there'll be lots of opportunities to speak throughout these 2 hours. Don't worry. Don't worry. We're going to have a lot of interaction this afternoon. As you've probably guessed, this is not a panel event. The key word in this session is action. We're going to have a proactive, middle of the afternoon session to help us glide into the cocktails. So congratulations for getting this far in the afternoon on day 2 of World Economic Forum and here at the SDG tent. I just want to thank you for being here with us today. I don't doubt that there are many brilliant things that are happening at the moment, and we really do appreciate your commitment to helping us to go from vision to action, developing regenerative futures for nature and society. I want to also thank the Intent for hosting us, and Fred over there in the corner, who has helped us make this happen. This is a really, really critical conversation that we're hoping to have, trying to have globally across a whole range of stakeholders. So very, very pleased that you're here with us today to further that conversation and bring a whole range of really exciting initiatives and work I know is represented in the room here together today and connect it. So let's start with me. I am Ryna Sherazi. I'm the interim chief executive of a relatively new organisation called Unearthodox, which was born out of the very impressive legacy of the Luke Hoffman Institute. We're an organisation that exists to invest in bold ideas and changemakers and social innovators who are tackling some of the knottiest challenges for people and planet. Today, I'll be joined by the very impressive Bill Sharpe. If you haven't heard of Bill Sharpe, which is unlikely if you're in the regeneration space, you definitely know of his work, and I'm really, really pleased that Bill was able to work with us, collaborate with Unearthodox on this event today and a whole range of other things. Bill is the co-founder of Future Stewards, which is the home of the Three Horizons Hub and Commons. And the Three Horizons is a vital tool for imagining and crafting a much more regenerative future. So, a little about Unearthodox. As I mentioned, we are an organisation that's been around just under 2 years. We have a bold vision, like many of the people here today, for equitable societies that actively regenerate nature. And we do this in a number of ways. I should say that one of the things that one of the reasons why it was felt that an organisation like this needed to survive and thrive were the gaps that we were seeing in traditional conservation work around the nexus between nature conservation and justice and social justice and human dignity. So we work on a range of pieces of work. I'm going to rattle through them today because we really want to get focused on the activity and the action today. But we work in a number of ways. Our methods for developing the change that we want to see is embedded in a deep systems design. So ensuring that any problem that we are working on is addressed in a systemic, connected way, and also that any solutions that we work with our change makers on is also designed in a way where the different parts of the system, we're very cognizant of how they're connected. We also use futures methods. identifying ways in which we all collectively want to see a better, stronger, more regenerative future. And we're bold about that. We're happy to go against the grain sometimes. And today will be a session where we'll be delving a little deeper into that future's work and the actions we need to get to that future. And we take those methods and we invest in social innovation. Typically, changemakers who are often, honestly, fall between the cracks. They fall between the cracks of philanthropy quite often. They fall between the cracks of a lot of traditional financing and incubators. But they're working on that really critical nexus between justice, between keeping people safe and in a dignified, living dignified lives, and nature conservation. So really that, really closely interlinked people and planet question. We also aim in all of this work to bring as much as we're able to, being a Global North organisation, as much of a pluralistic perspective to this work. And I'll go on to a little bit of work that started to address that. So here are some of our innovators. An apology, because I've got such little time today to introduce the organisation that I'm only going to be able to focus on a couple just quickly now, but please do speak to any of the Unearthodox folks in the room. If I just ask Latina and Sophia to also put their hands up in the cocktails or after this session, very, very happy to celebrate our brilliant innovators. So this is a cohort of 7 innovators. We go to launch on a programme with these wonderful individuals and their initiatives over the next year. And these are the people who, in their greatness, are falling between the cracks. And that's a tragedy. So as Unearthodox, we're taking a few risks. We are comfortable with that very early stage of innovation and ideation, which many incubators and accelerators find hard to invest in. So a couple I just want to highlight just now are Wakanyi Hoffman. Some of you may have come across Wakanyi. She was speaking at the weekend. Wakanyi is an individual who has set up an organisation called the African Folktales Project. And what the Folktales Project does is to incorporate African storytelling and traditional values really around the connection between African cultures and nature and the relationship with nature. And what she is doing with her initiative is to influence, to ignite a change within the education systems in which she operates. Ideally, setting up a new generation of individuals who are much more connected to nature and are much more committed to its protection and the protection of people than perhaps my generation. Another is Gal Zania. Gal is an AI whiz who is developing a model to have AI design I barely even know what it's called because I'm such a Luddite, but it's a model that helps individuals like me to effectively converse with nature, to converse with the not than human. So if I want to talk to a tree fern, to develop much stronger connections with that tree fern in order to make better decisions as society, Gal is developing some technology to help us to do that. And somebody I'm really delighted to have in the room today, Sarah. And perhaps Sarah, if you could put your hand up. Sarah is one of our cohort of early stage innovators. And Sarah is working at the bioregional level with an organisation called Living Stories Landscapes, bringing together governments, academics, social innovators, wisdom keepers, and many more to improve the response to the climate crisis. And Sarah will be joining us for the collaborative conversation after this session. So please do, if you're in there, come along and have a little chat to her. She's doing really exciting work across a broad spectrum. Okay. So, I actually heard this quote on a radio program this morning when I woke up, so I added it to the slide. And today, really, we are focusing on tomorrow, is probably the best way of providing a synopsis to this afternoon's session. And today's session forms a point in a journey that Unearthodox has been on the issue of regenerative futures. Now, before we jumped in as an organisation with this project, actually, I should say one thing. When I enter spaces like this, or trainings, convenings, conferences, I quite often am probably quite annoying in that I tend to ask the people around me, or my colleagues, definitely know I ask this, which is, who's missing from the room? Whose voice are we not hearing that's helping us to be better? And that's what's quite exciting about the way in which Unearthodox has developed its Regenerative Futures programme in early 2024, asking the question, well, who's typically left out of the sustainability question, or design, or solutions? Many people, it turns out. How can we build a future that is regenerative, that is owned, that is collective, and that helps us to deal with the existential problems that we have now, with the right minds and the right perspectives? So we've developed a few things over the last year, a creative call to imagine a regenerative future, a state of knowledge report which will be launched in the spring of this year, and a very special retreat that we held in November, bringing together many very diverse perspectives, from practitioners in regeneration to those working on tangential issues, academics, people from indigenous cultures that just look at regeneration in a totally different way to many of us in this room. And today really marks the dovetailing of some of the things that we surfaced from those conversations, with doing a much shorter version of some of those activities here today. I should say that retreat was 4 days. We're going to do this in 2 hours. But I hope that this sparks the beginning of a conversation with a number of you who may be interested in the issues of regeneration or working in regeneration, to both help us at Unearthodox to shape the next year and the year after's work. So we'll be launching an innovation challenge later in the year. But also to connect up the work that's already happening in this room. And together, those things, I hope, will lead to us progressing further and having much more impact. So the few things that surfaced from the room in November with that diverse cohort on the issue of regenerative futures was that we need to identify what chokes already regenerative systems, that we need to prioritise life over profit. I heard somebody at the weekend say, we're not in the business of doing business, we're in the business of life. And I really like that. Very similar sentiment. And that's inclusive of pluralistic, decolonial, ancestral knowledge that challenges harmful power structures. So I'd like you just to have those in mind, perhaps, as you do the exercise this afternoon. So the Three Horizons framework, we will be running an exercise that Bill will talk us through today. And before I hand over to Bill, I just want to very quickly hand over to Ole. Have I pronounced that correctly? Yeah. He's just going to say a little bit about how we're going to capture some of the connections, conversation, I hope some interesting sparks through today.
So up here, but also when you're going to present, my role is really to figure out how to map the system of this room. So there's a landscape up here that you could, that hopefully will be the map of the conversations that you will have. And bear with me in terms of, I'll just sketch out something that might trigger something in your minds. But the more you put up small icons, small visuals,
Okay, thank you. So, Future Stewards, Ryna mentioned, that's an initiative or even a movement that my colleagues and I are building up with the vision that we're not making enough collective impact. I guess we all know that. And one contribution to trying to improve that is to have some shared approaches to these sorts of conversations that we can all use at every level, from a kindergarten to a place like this, the World Economic Forum. For those of you who are at the top of the systems we run, or those of you who are struggling to get your voice heard. And Three Horizons emerged from some work of colleagues and I nearly 20 years ago now, and we found that it just lands very, very quickly, and it orients people to systemic change, to changing the patterns of life of which we're part, and seeing how we can step out of the current pattern into the future one. So I'm going to introduce that very quickly, just give you a few slides, and then we're going to use it as a framework for our conversation this afternoon. Not trying to do a full process, that's unrealistic given the numbers we've got here, but just give a flavour of that way of working. And actually, I'd just be interested, could I just have a show of hands, how many people have come across the Three Horizons framework already? Good, probably somewhere between a third and a half. Okay, so if any questions come up at the table, you can say, well, yeah, we're using it, this is how it works. Basic framework is we're looking at time out, the time relevant to our work, and mostly nowadays I use 2050, 2100. We know we've got to reach net zero 2050, and wouldn't it be good if we've got a fully regenerative society by 2100? One way or another, we'll be there, either doing well or not. And the vertical axis, I prefer the word pattern to system, because pattern emphasizes our relationship to the world and the way we see or can become aware of the patterns that we're part of and that we're reproducing for better or ill every day. So if we're having a Three Horizon conversation, it's because there's some landscape that's changing, and it's producing either a downward pressure on the existing way we're living our lives, or it's opening up some new opportunities. So you're all very familiar with the negatives that are creating pressure on the world, and also many people here are talking about some of the things opening up with artificial intelligence and new developments in any area. So we draw it like that as representing that pattern is going to fade away at some point. All patterns do. And the third horizon is that pattern that will come into being by some combination of the things we don't control and can't change, but also how we exercise our vision and hold a vision and work from that to implement the futures that we'd like to bring about. And the second horizon is that messy arena of change, in which the first horizon gradually gives way and we start trying things out. And some of those things will eventually settle down and become the point where we transition out of that period and into a new settled way of doing things. And I've described the three horizons in terms of that outward oriented, they're three patterns. Today's, the futures, and the one in between, and that's it basically. But they also represent three ways of behaving in the present moment. Instead of having a one-dimensional view of time, we can recognize that at every moment we're choosing which of these modes of behavior to privilege. The first horizon is that managerial sense of being responsible. As a manager, what am I responsible for? As a parent, what am I responsible for? We expect it of ourselves, we expect it of other people. If they don't do the right things, then there's a breakdown or a scandal, there's some problem. So we call that the managerial voice. The third horizon doesn't yet exist. We're holding it as a vision in our minds. It's the visionary voice, the dream we have for our own future or the future of the planet. It's held in mind as something then that we implement in every moment. And the first horizon and third horizon often find it very difficult to talk to one another. The first horizon thinks the third is out to lunch, just off with the fairies, and the third horizon sees the first as a bit of a dinosaur. So these two voices in many conversations, I see some of you smiling, you'll all be very familiar with that. You come out of the room and say, oh, they really don't get it, do they? They're going to be with the dinosaurs. And the second horizon is that more entrepreneurial voice. There's an opportunity, there's an opening, there's a chance. It's the moment where we commit. So the third horizon is, what do I stand for? Whatever the risk, whatever the cost. The second horizon is, what do I commit to? In the face of, with that possibility of that vision, what do I commit to, take a chance on, knowing that it's uncertain, there's some hazard involved, it might not work. If you've done any startups, or all of you have been taken many initiatives, I'm sure many of you will know that many of those initiatives just don't get there. They don't capture the process of change. And a very useful piece of terminology is we talk about H2 plus and H2 minus. Some people in the Welsh office called H2 minus the Sony mini disc when Apple had the iPod, and now it's a sort of shorthand. They'd say that policy is a bit mini disc, isn't it? You know, it means it was looking back to the previous generation instead of looking forward. And the nature of innovation is that it is often ambiguous. And look at something like carbon credits and offsets. A lot of debate around them because they can either be seen as a positive H2 plus, causing resources to flow where they're needed while we make the hard changes that we haven't fully invented yet, or it can be appropriated and captured by the first horizon as a sort of predatory delay. So many things are ambiguous in that space, and so it's good to explore which ones are plus or minus. I like to use this way of thinking then about the fundamental nature of transformation, the good old caterpillar and butterfly, and the nature of what we're doing here today. As long as a caterpillar doesn't change its internal structure, it'll eat and eat and eat all those cabbages, and it's just going to get fatter. And I often wonder what it feels like to be a caterpillar when it goes into being a pupa. And at that moment, it has to let its structure dissolve. And what it must be like to be that sort of goo. And what the biologists tell us, or as I've understood, is that the new structure is formed at that point between what are called imaginal cells, and they create new structures between themselves. And from those new structures, they start to absorb the resources they need to bring the caterpillar. So a nice way to think about what it takes in the second horizon is that we use that power of imagination to become the imaginal cells. And hence why we come all together to start building new relationships. And why I'm trying to build these processes that help us have that sort of discussion about how do we come together to create the essence of the new pattern. It's helpful to think then of that process as involving basically 3 stages. The envisioning stage is where we use the power of our minds, as Coleridge said, to start to nurture reality into being, and maybe we have to invent something for the hard-to-abate problems. But the critical period is here where we form what I like to call the minimum viable pattern, the minimum pattern that brings all the players together to start to live and embody the regenerative future. It isn't just a future out there that we'll invent sometimes, it's one we have to live our way into. And the process then is one of progressive involvement. As it grows, it brings many more actors into it, building it up until it can achieve the critical mass for the first horizon really to release its resources and move and become the new normal. So that's a very simple way of thinking about the stages of change. So what we're going to do now is use this as just as a framing of the discussion that you'll have at the tables, where we're looking at the fundamental shift as being from an extractive to a regenerative future, and exploring what critical actions we might take as a community to enhance our collective capacity for change, to form new patterns, new ecosystems of change. So do I need to say anything more about that? No. So to get this going, at each table, there's a member of the Unearthodox team who will act as a table facilitator and help us all keep on time. The room will get very noisy, and it would help me recover a degree of control of the process if you all adopt this method that when I put my hand up or you see a hand up in the room, you do 2 things. You first stop talking and then you put your hand up. So if you see hands up, so I'll use that to get control back so we can walk our way through the process. So what we'd like to do at the table is get yourselves organized into trios. We won't have time to share always right around the table, just for a process of introduction, to introduce yourself in that trio. So each person just take 2 to 3 minutes, no more, and just give your own very personal answer to these 2 questions. The first one, what do I stand for in that sense of that third horizon vision? I'm standing for reuniting the inner work of change with the outer work of change and trying to create a community of 100 million young people who know how to hold these conversations. That's what I'm trying to stand for. It doesn't take me 3 minutes to say that, you know. And what systemic barriers do I encounter? trying to find support for this sort of systemic change work and the capacity building. That's a critical barrier I encounter. So we're not trying to all agree our vision. You haven't got to persuade anybody else. You are all a unique embodiment of the third horizon of life. That's a wonderful thing. So you haven't got to persuade anyone else of your vision. You've just got to listen to each other's and see what resource that represents that will be of interest, and what barriers that person is feeling. So that's a Horizon 3 sense of vision, what you stand for. And this is a Horizon 1, what's really getting in the way. And in the language, Akolo Malafe, I struggle with his name, used this term, what's choking the system perhaps, what's just completely stopping a regenerative way of life that you're trying to build. So you've just do that at the table. They'll go through a little process, sharing in trios, and then you'll have a chance to share a little bit at the table, and then I'll move us on to the next stage. Okay?
This is yours.
So whenever he's doing that, you can turn it on for me. So you've had time in the trios to just introduce yourselves. Should be moving on to sharing what's come out of those. Okay, thanks. Okay, if you could wrap up at the table, please. Be wrapping up. If you can. Good. So given the limitations of time, we're not doing any plenary feedback of this stage, but we will do a plenary after the next stage where we're going to focus on what can we do about all this. And so at the table, if one of you would like to volunteer to be the feedback person, that'll be very much welcomed by the table facilitator. So, as I said in the introduction, the essential, where the rubber hits the road, the essential arena of action is the second horizon. That's where we make some sort of commitment to do something with all the risk that entails. And if you ever, many of you will have been entrepreneurs, started an organization, you know what that feels like as you step out of the certainty and take a risk on something. And it's very obvious that if we're going to reach this regenerative future, all of us who have some idea of what that might be need to take those risks. And of course, it'll be better if we can take some of them together and bring our different resources and capacities together. So that's why we're really emphasizing it as what I like to call an imaginal cells exercise. At each table, really just be as creative as you can, reach really as deep into yourself as you can, and to say, what can I really bring to this in a fresh way if we form some new relationships? How might we do something really different that escapes the hand of the first horizon and really is ready to be on that journey towards the third? So we've phrased it as, what can we do to further activate collective action towards regenerative futures? And you can just answer that at your own table, and then we shall share what each table has come up with, saying, in the light of the things we have to confront and motivated by the vision that we hold, what we could do would be these one or two things that we could really do differently. So this is a chance to share on behalf of the whole room what that might look like. So you'll go through it in 3 stages again. In order to maximize input, we've said let's have a trio discussion again, where you just take that question and then around 10 minutes to share that around the table. And then there should still be 10 minutes left for you to, as a table, say, now, given what we've all heard, here are the 2 or 3 things we'd like to feed back to the room as a whole. Okay, and your facilitators have that process in front of them. Off you go. So, if you haven't already, thank you. In the next minute or so, move on from your trios to sharing what came up at the tables. Okay? You have 5 minutes left at the table. There's a lovely mess of post-its on most of the tables. So please assign the report back and make a very selective choice. You will have 3 minutes and no more to report back. 3 minutes. So if you can please be wrapping up at your tables, please be wrapping up. So, if you could all just bring the process to an end. Good, thank you. So we'll allocate 3 minutes per table. If we get around, that'll take us about 20 minutes if you each take that time. And that'll still leave us 10 minutes to have a bit of shared conversation in the room that Ryna will moderate. Ryna, let me hand you that one, and I'll go and deliver.
Sorry, yeah. Hi. Hi, everyone. Hope you had good discussions. We've been speaking about a bunch of different things, but I'm going to mention two and then pass the microphone to the table. It starts off with the idea that we need a conductor, but is that is there a conductor that can help conduct society through systems change? And the question was actually maybe that's more of a football coach, because a conductor, it's relatively predictable what's going to come out, even though it changes every time. You have the partitions in front of you, whereas a football game might have a little bit more unknown inside it. And from that, we had a long conversation on all sorts of different players and partners who are already acting in this space and who can help. We've just a few names of the Biomimicry Institute, Warm Data Labs, about really, I guess, empathizing and changing the way in which people perceive their role in decision making, until we finally ended on the idea that actually society needs to start thinking about how it lets go, and the idea that within systems change there's fundamentally going to be this idea of loss, and that we've lost this ability to deal with loss and with change. And there's the irony actually is that we all have our iPhones on the table and they're completely obsolete every 2 years, but we're unable to accept the idea that we're going to be obsolete one day. And that's, I think, I don't know. Was there anything to ask? Sorry. Who's next?
I'm sure that was meant positively.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Maybe that's the best thing for the Earth. Thank you, Fred. Perhaps I'd like to invite a table that could build on what Fred's table just highlighted there. I heard a couple of conversations across the room that did build on some of those. Thank you so much. While you choose, or while Bill chooses you, you can see Ole is doing something very clever with his Miro board there, visualizing some of the feedback that's coming from the group.
I can try. I think even just summarizing this table is a bit of a challenge. I hope I can link it to Fred. So there's a fundamental ground that we talked about, which is about growth and about how much is enough and about what are we growing. How do we grow in quality of life rather than more material stuff is better? That paradigm shift includes a piece which is about measuring our true wealth, not measuring GDP as a flow, but measuring the stocks of wealth, including our natural capital and not incurring these debts to nature. And if we want to shift the way that our economy works to measure success, to measure that growth, we probably need to change corporate governance. Both who is at the table, younger people potentially with longer term views. There's mechanisms being explored to delegate shareholder votes to nonprofits to have an earth and society perspective at the table, so that you could have a broader stakeholder view at the table doing corporate governance, and where you could start to measure different things, measure the growth of true sort of wealth rather than the sort of continued increased consumption and flow. But then of course that that was a big part of what we talked about. The companies themselves are then in a conversation with the market where they do shape demand. They claim that they don't, but they do every day. And so how do we somehow create that feedback loop between consumers producing regenerative demand, demanding regenerative practices on the companies, and companies that are being governed by perspectives that are trying to hold those long-term points of view. Those seem to be the building blocks of a regenerative economy. I don't know if there are things that I missed from this table, but okay.
Thank you. That was a lovely, almost theory of change of a new economy. Anybody like to build on that challenge, in fact, anything that's come up so far?
We have a couple of points that were similar, so I won't go through those. That'll make my job a little bit easier. We started with the notion of collective and how we really need to think of this as a collective action, bringing people together to make things happen through a gentle revolution, showing what can, using the pull mechanism, not overthrowing things overnight, but showing people what can be done. And to do that, we need to have the young people at the table, and we need to broaden the tent to include the people who don't agree with all of us sitting in this room right now. So a bigger tent. We had a conversation about how complex this all is, and that we need to be able to communicate simply about all of this complexity. We have a tendency to try to communicate the issues in all their complexity, and we lose people and disempower people and block people when that happens. The importance of education came up a few times, starting very, very young. Building sustainability in, not just at postgraduate levels, but at very, very young levels, including the way we go about teaching them, not delivering the truth to them. Here's the message, ingest it, but teaching them to ask questions and think and digest on their own. And a really important one that came up that I personally love and struggle with is building in well-being, that those of us who are pushing for a better world often carry kind of an emotional tax related to working towards something that doesn't always work. So making sure that we're being regenerative with ourselves and our own energy so that we can contribute to a broader regenerative future. And the last point I'll close with was we need to build in hope and faith amidst all of the doom and gloom.
Thank you so much, Linda. What a lovely
Anything to add,
set of things to look forward to.
Choose.
Any additions, any challenges? I think there's a natural lead on from the group over there in the corner.
Yeah, that's it all resonates super well. So not repeating the points that you've already made, but we try to land on three key parts of the solution to bridge that gap. So the first one was really to operate from this larger systems view, coordinating all the actors, coordinating all the capitals, and moving beyond the ego towards what actually needs to be funded, for example, to create the entire ecosystem so that all the solutions can be brought to the table. As a second point, also aligned with what we have just heard, the importance of narratives. So if we talk about storytelling or we talk about narratives, the kind of approach that we took here is how important it is, even for each person here in this room, to when we go out of the Davos bubble, to go and bridge that divide, right? And to engage in conversations with people who might have other views or might have prejudices of, oh, you are the Davos crowd, right? So like the important point of bridging narratives with those who are not in the room today. And also linked to that to try to maybe sometimes use the logic of the Horizon 1 to bridge into the Horizon 3, because otherwise we might not get everybody on the table. And the third point that we have was really to move from a fear and chaos and tragedy narrative towards one of focusing on the solutions. And so that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean scaling and really celebrating business models that work. It can also mean, as we have heard, integrating the next generation. And for example, maybe having an incentive system where there's a pool of money where young people out of university, the brightest and smartest and hungriest, can collaborate together to create new regenerative startups and things like that. And overall, we really felt it's important that we contribute to celebrating the men in the arena. Because sometimes it's really difficult once you start to do something. There's a finger pointing, oh, why don't they do more, right? Can't they do it right? So that we kind of collectively contribute to a culture of celebrating those who are trying to solve the problems.
Brilliant. Thank you, Britta. Superb.
So I'm really happy to see that everyone here is like super aligned and we're bringing almost the same topics together. So to add to what Britta was saying, because a lot of things that we were thinking about were already said, I was in a lunch before with Paul Pullman, and he was mentioning the fact that when we try to see these CEOs that are like really leading the way and making these big changements that we all want to see, but are really to embody today, there are like really few people. We don't have more than like sometimes like 5 people to name. So to have like a system where we're like really putting these people and amplifying their voice and having these role models of like CEOs and people that are taking big risks in order to make all these changes that we want to see, we think that is like really important. Another thing that we mentioned that is also coming through like all this amplification of solutions is like to have a kind of like a platform where of real like solutions, like what we can call something like creating a blueprint for scaling for social change. So so people can get informed and at the same time can know around the world that there are other things happening, and actually there are so many like projects that could be like not copied, but like the methodologies could be implemented in other places. So this is something that could like accelerate a lot to have this ecosystem of solutions that is shared and well known, and that we have like someone also that is like maybe unorthodox or other that is proposing this kind of platform for other people. I will say that afterwards we were speaking about like finding mechanism in order to value regeneration. This is linked both by gathering like this gather, for instance, in order to have a shared vision and concept of what means regeneration also, and from that, build on from that shared vision together and develop like different mechanisms. It could be sometimes, what we're saying in our table, a little bit provocative. Of course, it can be incentives, but also sometimes we need to put some sticks. So like for the people that are doing actions that are not like really like rewarding in society, in which way today we're going to find mechanisms in order to stop that to happen. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Superb. We're not hearing many arguments so far. We're all aligning. Hi, Carlos. Thank you.
Well, we don't disagree with, I think, anything that was said, but sorry, we are going to be a bit uncomfortable. Because one of the conclusions is be comfortable being uncomfortable. Welcome to the real world. So I think the frameworks of interpretation we have been using to make sense of what is happening and what we want to happen, we have to question them very seriously. To use an expression that I don't use, our theory of change has not worked. You know, so the political developments that we see around are saying that maybe the horizon 2 in the 3 horizon scenarios, maybe we don't like at all this horizon 2 which is emerging, right? I think we don't like it. But we have to face the reality. And this is a matter of learning in the deep sense of the term, in the sense of changing, in the sense of, oh, we have to change the way we are interpreting what is happening and not going faster. Bayo Akomolafe has been quoted, I will quote him again, when he says, oh, we have no time left, let's slow down. Because not slowing down is an obstacle to have a better understanding, a better epistemology to address what does Trump 2.0, to make clear my point, what does Trump 2.0 mean in the context of our own framework of interpretation, which is now broken. The narrative we had during decades about the progress of humanity is, not working. And I said this as the Secretary General of the Club of Rome, so we have some experience in this. You know, the things we said 50 years ago, I usually ask the question, how could we learn what we already know? How could we learn in the sense of changing what we already know? So the invitation from me, but this table, you know, is very much to look at the assumptions, because when you face this uncomfortable situation where, oh, we try to do something, we're pushing into certain direction which we feel is good, so we have also this sense of moral superiority, you know, we are fighting for the good things, for both humanity and the planet. And then the reality is saying, no. Wow, very harsh. Very harsh. I mean, I'm sure this feeling is everywhere in the room. And then you have two options, you know, and one is very difficult. The easy one, which is not the good one, in my view, the easy one is, oh, let's persist. Let's keep the course. Again, the Club of Rome has been facing this dilemma for more than 50 years, and some of our colleagues persist. Let's go forward with the same theory of change. I think we have to be smarter than that as a collective. And being smarter means, no, we have to understand better what this situation means. We have to review our hidden assumptions, our blind spots, including what it means for the global majority, which is not present in this room. It is present, but not at the level where the global majority is in the world, which is 90% of the population. So the invitation, but this is not to stay in the narrative of tragedy or anything like that. For me, but I recognize it might be difficult, this is super exciting. You know, 7 years after the Limits to Growth, we published a book titled No Limits to Learning, which was saying exactly that. We are able to learn, but learning is not an easy exercise. You know, if we don't need, we don't learn. Now we need, collectively, at a deeper level.
Thank you, Carlos. Real food for thought. We've almost sparked a whole other conversation that could last another 2 hours from what has come from the groups this afternoon. And I would love for that conversation to continue and for some of the already kind of sort of synapses, as I think of them, happening across the room to develop further. Should we just take a 30 seconds just to look at the visual articulation of some of the conversations that we've had across the room? Ole, do you want to just talk us through how we can actually contribute to this this Miro, this visual articulation with further thoughts?
Okay, so it'll be followed up, and everybody will get it. So, but you can also contribute. So, as I said in the beginning, and I think what you all are about, systems thinking. It's just a map of some of the things we started with down here on the left, and then over here was the sort of what we've been working with, and then the very quick version of solutions that are here. Well, out on the horizon to the left here, you see that there are system barriers that you talked about. There might be already some of you who have the Regenerative Future vision of what it looks like here in the center. Is it moving? No, right now it's not moving.
Yeah, it was moving a second ago.
It should go. Anyway, while I wait for the computer to update, there we go. And then to the right, there's opportunities that are there. The follow-up will really be including some of your inputs. So what we could do is, if you want, you can scan the code right now with a phone, and you can you'll get an option to write a barrier, what does the future look like, and orange opportunities. So remember, you can write what you want now and later, and remember to put the color code of the post-it note. Then they'll pop up as we go along, and it'll be an ongoing sketch and draft that will be taken further. And we'll see if some of that could work. So let's just see, are anybody having success with adding a post-it note? Yep, there came one. So up there in the corner, they're coming. So they're small in the beginning, but anyway, while we finish, it'll still be available, and you can just keep them coming if you want to add a barrier, what you have an idea of what does that future look like, and then if there are any opportunities.
Thank you. This was just introduced to me today, and this has blown my mind. And one of the things that I'm sure we all feel a bit of a pain point on is these really rich discussions. Then, where do they go? Sometimes, if we have the time and the resources, we might pick them up outside of the room. And I appreciate Ole suggesting this to us as a relatively easy way to stay connected on some of the conversations that are happening in the room today. To then, please, continue talking to anyone that you've connected to today, or indeed to us at Unearthodox, about the work that you're doing. Perhaps it's sparked from this conversation, perhaps it's been sparked from other things that you've been involved in. I'm hoping I can move on to the next slide. Can I, Fred? So, well, as has been mentioned, implied in the feedback from the tables, but also articulated very clearly from Carlos over here in this table, the work that we're trying to do to work towards the regenerative future, to really, truly work towards a just transitions. Let's just think about the justice part of that phrase. It's bloody difficult. It's hard. It's very, very uncomfortable. And one of the things that we do at Unearthodox is to take a deep breath, take a big gulp, and embrace that discomfort, because we know that in that discomfort is often the ideas, the innovations, the creativity that fuel the solutions that we need for the future. If you're game for it, join us on the journey. I mentioned our work in 25 and 26, working with our cohort of innovators. This conversation will dovetail with a number of other pieces of work that we're doing to design the next innovation challenge in 2025. If you have found the model of working on the 3 horizons, I would encourage you to get in touch with Bill and his team, doing superb work across a range of different sectors. And that's what I find really powerful, is that the 3 horizons can be used, at community school level, right up to, multinational businesses and governments and so on. I think there's a real richness in that, so do get in touch with him as well. We are a couple of minutes away from the drinks now, so I just want to thank everyone for being in the room today. I know it was noisy, and I hope that's because you're having really rich conversations. Certainly the table that I was facilitating was doing so. Do stay in touch with each other. We made sure that as many people as possible sat on a table with people they didn't know, and I hope you understand the reason for that now. And to come and speak to myself or others in the team, and of course Sarah, about the innovations that she's working on over there in the Philippines. Thank you, everyone.